brittle winter morning. The air held its breath. The lake moaned. Eli's boots were off before he hit the tree line, socks soaked, splinters stabbing. His legs cut jagged paths through the thigh-deep snow. The scream still echoed, high, sharp, swallowed by the white. He didn't know which girl it was, or if it was both. A crow flapped somewhere overhead, dragging its shadow across the snow. The lake groaned again. He ran faster. It had been a good morning. The girls had laughed, full and loose, like children are supposed to, not like how they'd been lately. Lila had tied June's braids too tight and kissed her forehead afterward in apology. Eli had smiled, his face split with the fatigue of too many days without sleep, but a smile all the same. He'd been chopping wood, humming some half-remembered lullaby, the steam of his breath rising and vanishing into the pale blue above. The sun had just cracked the horizon, golden on snow. He hadn't seen them sneak off. The ice didn't break all at once. It started with a single crack, a question whispered too loud. Lila had been skipping, spinning on her boots, singing something she made up on the spot. June had followed, slower, quiet as always, her mittened hands clenched tight around a pine cone shaped like a heart. Then a long, aching groan. Then stillness. Then collapse. The world became water, cold like knives, cold that makes you forget how to scream. Lila surfaced first, then dipped again. June didn't come up. By the time Eli reached the lake, his lungs were torn open by the cold, his vision rimmed with white fire. He saw the hole, a jagged black wound in the middle of the lake. No motion, no heads. Then a hand, then another. He didn't think, just ran. The world narrowed to the space between the trees and the water. His breath burned his throat. His chest howled. He dropped to his knees at the edge of the ice. It groaned again, warning him. He didn't listen. The first plunge stole his soul. It was like falling into death itself, full of silence and pressure. He couldn't tell up from down. Only the need. Find them. One. Then the other. His hand caught Lila's coat first. Her body limp weightless, floating just beneath the surface. He yanked her up, shoved her onto the ice like a sack of wet leaves. She coughed. He wept and turned back under. Seconds blurred. Then his fingers brushed wool. June! She wasn't moving. He hauled her up, his fingers already numb and purple, and pressed her to his chest. The three of them lay there, soaked and shaking, steam rising from their bodies like ghosts leaving. He wrapped them both in his arms, whispering apologies he couldn't finish. From a far road, headlights flickered through the trees, then vanished. No one came. That night, Eli sat by the fire, a blanket around his shoulders and one child in each arm, their hair still damp, their skin hot from bath water and trembling fever. He pressed a kiss to each forehead. June stirred in her sleep. Lila murmured something about angels. He stared into the flames. Behind them, the log cabin creaked. Wind slid beneath the old doorframe like breath. He watched the fire crackle and let the silence hold him. On the table beside him sat a tattered leather journal, his wife's. He opened to the first blank page. His fingers shook as he wrote. I almost lost him today. I'm not enough. I never was. The next morning, frost bloomed on the windows like pale veins. Eli woke before the girls. He always did. He stoked the fire, boiled water for oatmeal, and laid out two mismatched bowls, one with a chip shaped like a crescent moon, the other stained with old tea. He folded socks, plaited Lila's braid, wiped June's nose with a warm cloth. The cabin was quiet but full, of smoke, of steam, of memories that hung in corners like forgotten coats. He looked out the window toward the lake. The hole had already frozen over, as if it never happened. He buried the girls' wet coats in a snowbank, hoping the cold would leach the chill from them. When the girls were dressed and fed, he bundled them close and sat them by the fire with books they'd read a dozen times. Lila traced the pictures. June just stared into flames. He needed to work. Firewood was low, and the pantry emptier still, but he couldn't leave them. Not after that. So he sat and listened to the crackle and tried not to fall apart. Later, as dusk fell, he lit a single lantern and hung it by the window. It was a small ritual. He'd done it every night since his wife passed, not because he expected her to return, but because the light felt like a promise. Some nights, he swore it flickered longer than it should. Around midnight, June crawled into his bed, a small, warm bundle. She didn't say a word. Eli held her. He remembered the night they were born, how tiny they'd been, how his wife had whispered, 2 hearts, and one of yours to share. He hadn't known then how much it would cost, or how worth it would be. The next day, the sun came late. Snow had fallen overnight, softening the world. Everything was muffled. Still, Eli walked out onto the porch with a mug of hot water and stared across the field. No birds, no cars, just white and silence. He thought about the scream. How close it had been to the one he let out the night his wife died. That raw, breaking sound, the kind that empties you. He pulled his coat tighter. Somewhere far off, an engine hummed. He turned, eyes scanning the tree line. Nothing, only snow. The days blurred. He kept the fire going. He rationed the oatmeal. He read the same bedtime story, The Bear Who Waited, every night, his voice softer with each reading. He did not speak of the lake. The girls did not ask. But sometimes, when they thought he wasn't looking, they'd sit close to each other, hands clasped, staring at the window, listening. Eli knew that silence. He knew what waited inside it. On the 4th day, he found something strange. A handprint, small, on the frost of the porch railing. It wasn't one of the girls. It was too high and too wide. He checked the door. Still locked. No tracks in the snow. Just that hand. And next to it, something scratched into the wood. A single word. Soon. That night, he lit the lantern again. But this time, he waited beside it, just in case. The cabin smelled of smoke and wet wool. Eli's hands were raw from splitting logs. Outside, snow fell in thick, silent flakes, covering the path he'd shoveled the day before. It didn't matter. No one came down this road. Not anymore. Inside, the girl sat cross-legged by the hearth. June clutched her stuffed rabbit to her chest, ears threadbare from years of quiet comfort. Lila hummed softly, braiding and unbraiding her sister's hair. The fire popped. A log shifted. Sparks drifted upward like tiny souls escaping. Eli watched them. Not for the first time. He wondered what it would take for his girls to laugh again the way they had before the lake. Earlier that morning, he'd found himself staring at their faces in sleep. Lila's cheeks were flushed from dreams. June's lips moved faintly, whispering to ghosts only she could see. His hand hovered over June's hair, wanted to smooth it down. He pulled back. I don't know how to fix this. He thought, I don't even know if I can. The pantry was down to 1 jar of peanut butter and a half-empty bag of oats. He wasn't sure how he'd stretch them for 3 more days. Eli took the girls' boots from the corner and turned them upside down. Melt water dripped onto the wooden floor. He'd need to dry them out by the fire again tonight. Daddy, Lila asked, her voice feather soft. Yes, baby? Will we always be cold? The words hit him like a stone to the chest. He crouched in front of her, eyes level with hers. The firelight danced in her wide brown eyes, his wife's eyes. No, sweetheart, he whispered. We'll be warm soon. I promise. Promises were dangerous things. That night, he sat at the table sharpening his hatchet by lantern light. The metal hissed softly against the whetstone. Outside, snow curled against the window panes, muting the world to nothing. He remembered another night like this, years ago, before the girls were born. A bottle in his hand, a slammed door, the sound of his wife crying in the bedroom. He'd sworn he'd never be that man again. He'd promised her, and he'd kept that promise. For 7 years now, But some nights, the silence pressing so tight he could feel it in his teeth. On the third day after the lake, he spotted movement on the road, a glint of black against the white. He stood frozen in the doorway, heart thudding. A sleek, dark vehicle, too shiny, too new for this old road, crept along the tree line. Snowflakes melted against its warm hood. The driver didn't stop. Eli watched until the taillights disappeared behind the pines. The next morning, he found an envelope on the porch. No footprints in the snow. No tire tracks. Just the envelope, resting neatly atop the railing, a single snowflake clinging to its corner. His hand shook as he opened it. Inside was a folded piece of cream-colored stationery. In precise, slanted handwriting. "You've been seen. Help is coming." No signature. No explanation. He stared at the words for a long time, then tucked the note into his wife's journal, between pages still stained with her grocery lists and half-finished prayers. He whispered into the empty room, "If only help could bring you back too." That evening, as the girls slept, Eli sat in the rocking chair by the fire. The chair had been his father's, the only thing he kept from a man who taught him fists before words. It creaked under his weight. Eli rubbed at the calluses on his hands and stared at the flames. A memory surfaced. His wife, belly swollen with the twins, had whispered to him one night, "Do you think they'll know we love them, Eli? Even if we don't get it right all the time." He'd kissed her hand. Of course they'll know. But now, watching the girls curl tighter in their sleep, he wasn't so sure. He felt like a house built wrong, leaning hollow, ready to collapse under the first hard wind. The storm hit that night. Wind howled through cracks in the log walls. Snow piled against the doorframe. Eli stuffed rags under the door to block the draft. He piled every blanket he owned onto the girl's bed and added his own coat for good measure. At some point, June woke and crawled into his lap by the fire. "Daddy," she whispered, "did the angels save us at the lake?" Eli swallowed hard. His voice was low and rough when he answered, "Maybe, baby, or maybe it was your mama looking out for you." June nodded against his chest, her hair warm and damp. "Can she look out for you too?" His throat closed. "I don't know," he said. The wind screamed louder, and beneath it, for just a moment, Eli thought he heard the low rumble of engines. By dawn, the storm had passed. The world outside the window was still and perfect, blanketed in fresh white. The trees bowed under their heavy coats. Eli pushed the door open. The snow was waist-high. He shoveled a path to the woodshed, breath clouding the air. Each scrape of the shovel felt impossibly loud in the silence. As he worked, he noticed something strange. A set of faint tracks leading to the edge of the property. They weren't his. That evening, as he stacked it by the fire, he found the girls watching him with wide, solemn eyes. "Daddy," Lila said softly, "are the people in the black car bad?" He froze. "You saw them?" She nodded. They stopped for a little while. "I saw them from the window." June clutched her sister's hand. "Maybe they're angels too." Eli's jaw tightened. "I don't think angels drive cars," he said quietly. But part of him, some small, aching part, hoped he was wrong. That night, he lit the lantern again. And this time, he didn't go to bed. He sat by the window, the girls sleeping in a heap behind him, and watched the snow fall in quiet drifts. Somewhere in the trees, a branch cracked under heavy weight, and for the briefest moment, he thought he saw headlights again. But when he blinked, they were gone. The storm passed, but the cold stayed. It clung to the cabin walls like a memory. Eli woke to silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy quiet that makes you feel watched. He eased out of bed, careful not to wake the twins. June's fingers were curled around a scrap of flannel from his old shirt. Lila had kicked her blanket off, one foot sticking out like a pale, delicate bird. The fire had burned low. The room smelled faintly of wet ashes. Eli pulled on his coat and stepped outside. The snow was knee-deep. Above, The sky was washed in a pale gray that promised more snow before nightfall. Eli's breath steamed as he shoveled a path to the shed. Each scrape of the shovel cut the quiet like a blade. Halfway through his work, he heard it, a sound that didn't belong here. Engines, low, powerful. He straightened, heart drumming against his ribs. At first, he thought he imagined it, but then he saw them, 10 sleek, black SUVs winding slowly up the snowy road toward the cabin. Their headlights cut long, pale tunnels through the trees. Snowflakes melted on their polished hoods. The lead vehicle came to a stop at the edge of the clearing. The others fanned out behind it, idling softly like wolves at rest. Eli gripped the shovel tighter. The door of the lead SUV opened. A woman stepped out. She was tall, wrapped in an elegant charcoal coat with fur lining. Snowflakes caught in her dark hair. Her boots crunched softly on the frozen ground as she walked toward him. Eli's fingers tightened on the shovel handle. "Who are you?" His voice cracked from disuse. The woman stopped a few feet away. Her eyes, gray, steady, tired, met his. "My name is Margot," she said gently. "I'm your wife's aunt." Eli felt like the wind had been punched out of him. "Aunt," he rasped. She didn't speak of me. I wasn't there when she needed me." Margot's voice faltered for a second, then steadied again. "But I'm here now." Eli's jaw worked. He couldn't find the words. Margot took a slow breath, her boot sinking slightly into the snow. "I know you don't trust me. I wouldn't either. But I've come to help." From a cabin window, Lila's small face appeared, her nose pressed to the glass. Then June's head popped up beside her sister's. "Daddy," Lila called softly. "Who's that?" Eli turned, saw their wide, frightened eyes. He lowered the shovel. Margot's voice was softer now. "You've done more than anyone could have asked. You've kept them alive. You've kept them loved. But you don't have to do it alone anymore." Eli stared at her, chest tight. Pride flared hot in his belly. Then shame. Then something else. Something he didn't have a name for yet. "I don't need charity," he muttered. Margot nodded. "This isn't charity. It's family." Her eyes softened, and she held out a folded piece of paper. "I found this in my sister's things. She wrote it for you before she passed." Eli took the paper with numb fingers. The handwriting stopped him cold. His wife's. The letter smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. "Eli, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay. I'm sorry. I wanted more time. For us. For the girls. I know you're scared. I know you think you're not enough. But I've seen your heart, even when you can't. You're a better man than you believe. Promise me you won't close the door if help comes knocking. Let the girls grow up with a village around them. Let yourself heal too. You deserve that." Eli sank onto the porch steps, the letter trembling in his hands. The words blurred. His breath fogged the paper. Lila and June appeared at the door, their small hands clutching each other. "Daddy," June whispered. He opened his arms. They ran to him, burying their faces in his chest. Margot stood quietly nearby. "I brought people," she said. "Carpenters, food, warm clothes. Whatever you need." Eli's throat worked as he looked at her. "I don't even know you." "No," Margot agreed softly. "But I know them, and that's enough for me." That evening, the SUV's engines purred quietly in clearing. Men and women in warm coats carried crates into the cabin. Flour, sugar, canned peaches, jars of honey. A carpenter began patching holes in the roof. A young woman knelt by the hearth, showing June how to stitch a tear in her rabbit's ear. Eli stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. As dusk fell, Margot lit a lantern and placed it on the porch railing. "Old family habit," she said. "Light for the lost?" Eli asked. She smiled faintly. "Light for anyone finding their way home." Inside, the twins sat on the rug, warm in new coats, eating soup from real porcelain bowls. Eli watched them, the knot in his chest loosening by a thread. He whispered to the fire, I don't deserve this. Margot, standing behind him, replied softly, Maybe not, but they do, and they need you whole. That night, as the twins slept, Eli stepped outside. The air was sharp and still. The SUV sat silent in the snow, their black forms reflecting the faint light of the stars. He pulled the letter from his pocket, ran a thumb over the familiar scrawl. Promise me you won't close the door. Eli looked up at the night sky, and for the first time in years, he whispered back, Okay. Morning came softly. The fleet of black SUVs stood silent in the clearing, their surfaces glossed with a fine layer of snow. The world smelled of pine and wood smoke, and the pale sun broke through the clouds in long golden threads. Eli stood on the porch, boots planted in fresh powder, watching steam curl from the cabin's chimney. Inside, the girls laughed, light, unbroken laughter he hadn't heard in months. And for a moment, Eli didn't move. He let the sound wash over him like a bomb. Margot had brought life back into the cabin. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and bread now, not damp wool. The pantry shelves groaned under the weight of jars, sacks, and tins. The twins wore coats so warm they squeaked when they hugged him. Their small boots left prints like bird tracks across the cabin floor. Strangers, Margot's people, worked quietly. A carpenter mended the sagging porch steps. A mechanic crouched beside the old truck in the snow, coaxing life back into its rusted engine. A young woman with kind eyes helped Lila mend the frayed edge of her blanket, teaching her to sew with hands patient as the falling snow. Eli had watched all of it in silence. By afternoon, the workers departed in quiet groups, boots crunching through snow as they returned to their SUVs. Margot lingered. She stood at the edge of the porch with a mug of tea, her breath curling faintly in the cold air. You're still wary of me, she said softly, not as a question. Eli leaned against the railing, hands shoved deep in his pockets. I don't know how to accept this. Margot's lips curved in the faintest smile. Kindness feels heavy to those who've carried too much alone. Her gaze drifted toward the cabin window. The girls were visible inside, playing a clumsy game of checkers near the hearth. They're the reason I came, she said. But you remind me of my sister. Stubborn, proud, so full of love it aches. Eli's jaw tightened. His voice was low when he spoke. I failed her. I failed them. Margot shook her head. You didn't fail. You stayed. That's the hardest thing of all. That evening, Eli took the twins to the frozen lake. The sky glowed pink and gold, the ice reflecting their small figures like glass. Is it safe? Lila asked. It is now, Eli said. He held each girl's mittened hand as they shuffled onto the ice. Their laughter rang out as he showed them how to glide, clumsy, wobbly, but free. For a moment, Eli swore he felt her there, his wife, watching from the pines, smiling at the family she'd left behind. When the sun slipped behind the trees, Eli crouched at the edge of the lake. With his pocket knife, he carved 3 letters into the oak tree nearby. L+J+E. A quiet promise. A family reborn. Back at the cabin, Margot prepared to leave. The girls clung to her coat. Will you come back? June asked. Margot knelt to meet their eyes. Only if your daddy says I can, she said softly. Both girls turned to Eli. Their eyes, so wide, so full of hope, tore the last of his walls down. Any time, he said, his voice thick. Margot pressed a small envelope into Eli's callous hand. Open this later. He nodded, unable to speak. Then she climbed into her SUV. One by one, the fleet pulled away, headlights vanishing into the forest like a dream fading at dawn. That night, the cabin was warm. Eli sat by the fire, the twins curled against him, their hair smelling faintly of pine and soap. He opened the envelope Margot had given him. Inside was a deed, a house, not far from here, warm, safe, ready for them. There was also a note, written in her elegant hand. You've carried enough, Eli. Let the world carry you now. Tears blurred his vision. He pressed the paper to his chest. The twins shifted in their sleep, arms draped over his chest like anchors. Eli tilted his head back and stared at the rafters. For the first time in years, he felt the tightness in his chest ease. Outside, snow fell softly. The lantern glowed faintly on the porch, a beacon against the dark. As the fire crackled low, Eli whispered into the warm hush, "I thought I'd lost everything. Turns out I just had to open the door." If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from.